It started as another early morning workout, timers beeping and treadmills humming, with my straight best friend spotting me between sets. I thought I knew the script: sweat, protein shakes, banter. But a quieter rhythm took over, breath by breath, until one brave question changed everything between us. That night. If this story resonates, please like, subscribe, and share. Comment your experiences with unexpected love. Your support helps a lot. My name is Evan, and I practice family medicine in Chicago. If you've ever walked down a Chicago street just before sunrise, you know that clean hush, the city holding its breath while the sky makes up its mind. That's when I started going to the gym again, after years of telling my patients to care for their bodies and then letting my own fall to the bottom of a crowded calendar. I promised myself 30 minutes, then an hour, then a little longer, mostly because the treadmill does not argue and the weight rack does not talk back. It's a place where effort and outcome still have a simple relationship. Lift, breathe, repeat. I don't share patients' stories. Confidentiality matters, and privacy is a sacred trust. But I will share my own story with you today because it surprised me in the best and bravest way. It started with a workout and a face I hadn't seen in more than a decade. "Evan?" The voice came from behind the row of rowing machines, where the gray light from the street glazed everything with a watery sheen. I turned, wiping sweat from my neck with an old clinic t-shirt, and there he was, Jake Thompson. We'd known each other in college, mutual friends, pickup basketball, late-night pizza after an anatomy exam. He'd been on the baseball team, a pitcher with a calm that could still a room. Jake had been the kind of straight friend you fall into a rhythm with because the terms are simple. Laugh, hang out, nothing complicated. "Jake?" I said, and laughed as he brought me into a hug that smelled like cedar soap and something like cut grass. His hair was shorter than I remembered, a little salt starting at the temple, the kind of detail you notice and refuse to admit matters. "What are you doing here?" he asked, stepping back to look at me as if I were an old friend and a painting at the same time. "Trying to practice what I preach," I said. "I tell folks to get moving, reduce stress. Now I'm listening to my own advice before someone writes me up." He smiled at that. Kindness around the eyes, the way you know a person hasn't lost their softness after years of real life. "I moved to Chicago last year," he said. "Civil engineer. Mostly bridges and boring things you can drive over. Gym makes the rest of the day make sense." "You know," I nodded. "There are things we do to forgive the day before it even begins." He pointed to the bench press. "You want a spot, Doc?" I laughed. The last person who called me Doc was a 6-year-old with a dinosaur sticker. He grinned, and we set up like we had never not stood next to each other. Weights, small jokes, the rhythm of counting reps. He had always been steady, a person you could trust to stand near you when you lifted heavy things. If you've never benched with a good spotter, I'll tell you, it's not just about safety. It's about saying, "I believe you can do this, and I will be here with hands open in case belief is not enough." We started meeting in the mornings, because that's what happens when two people nod 3 days in a row. You establish a ritual without signing any papers. We did deadlifts on Tuesdays, cardio on Thursdays, the kind of consistency that makes the rest of your life align. He told me about projects downtown, pouring concrete in the cold, and how Chicago winters don't care about your feelings. I told him about my clinic on the near west side, the seniors who canceled appointments because of ice, the new diabetes class we were piloting, the small, persistent miracles that walk through a clinic door on any given day. "Do you still play ball?" I asked one morning when the snow was more sideways than down. "Shoulder says no," he said, rolling it in a circle. "I can throw a spiral, but the fastball retired me. I watch games. It's easier on my pride." I knew that tone. We all have something we thought would carry us longer than it did. It's why I tell patients who loved running that walking is not failure. It is a different generosity you offer your body. Our friendship stretched into places friendship goes, text messages about a new protein bar that tasted like chalk, a joke about a trainer who wore neon everything. The picture of the skyline after a storm lit the sky in 2 directions. Other things, too, the kind you don't always let happen in your 30s because you are responsible and grown and less willing to let people close enough to disappoint you. But he was easy. It felt like finding the stairwell in a building you've worked in for years and realizing there's a quieter way upstairs. If you're listening because you're curious how a story like mine starts, it's this: small kindnesses. The day my clinic ran late and I missed our lift, I found a note on my locker. "You owe me 20 push-ups and a breakfast burrito." It was signed with an absurdly dramatic signature and a tiny smiley face that made something loosen behind my ribs. I am a gay man. That is not news, not to me, not to the people who matter. But with Jake, I didn't name it because there are things you do not need to name when you already know what they are. He'd dated women in college. He'd been the kind of straight that straight men are when you're 20, comfortable but not obnoxious, a blessing compared to the other kind. We were just two men making the mornings gentler. One Saturday, a bright one where the lake looked like someone had just polished it, we decided to run instead of lifting. He wore an old Cubs cap. I put on a beanie that made me look like a longshoreman. We jogged past the geese who own the path no matter how you feel about it. He matched my pace without comment, which is a love language among people who run. "Did you ever think you'd end up a doctor?" he asked, after a mile had made us honest with our breathing. "Yes," I said, and then no. And then yes again. I thought I'd specialize. Cardiology, maybe. But I like family medicine. I like watching people's lives in context. There's more hope in that picture. "Hope," he said like he was tasting the word. We ran a little more. "You know, I always thought hope was a plan. Now I think it might be a muscle." I looked over at him and almost tripped on a crack in the path. He shrugged. "Sorry, that sounded like Instagram wisdom." "No," I said, smiling. It sounded like something I would say. We met at the grocery store afterward because running in the cold means you can justify pancakes. We walked the aisles like two retired men comparing produce, arguing about blueberries. He put a bag of pancake mix in the cart and looked up at me. "What do you tell people about sugar?" I laughed. "Would you like the short talk or the one with charts?" "Short," he said. "It's Saturday. Favor whole fruit over juice. Pair carbs with protein. Notice what you eat. Don't judge yourself for it. And enjoy your pancakes." He nodded, and we cooked them at my apartment because the city had decided to throw a surprise sleet party, and nobody needs to be on a bus with wet jeans. I live in a small place, the kind with a view of another brick building and, if you angle your head, a piece of the sky that catches sunsets like stained glass. He poured batter and told me about growing up in Indiana, about a father who loved him the way fathers love sons they worry will leave, too tightly, with rules that were meant to protect but turned into fences. He didn't complain. He said it like a man giving you the lay of the land before a hike. "Do you have someone?" he asked, flipping a pancake and giving me a look I decided meant neutral curiosity. "Not right now," I said. "I had a long relationship. We wanted different things." That is a shorthand for 1,000 things, many of them good and a few of them slow-moving disasters. "What different things?" he asked with that same gentle curiosity. "Pace," I said. "Time, a sense of home." He wanted a city that wasn't this one. I wanted to be with my patients, my clinic, these winters I complain about. I wanted a dog eventually. "A dog is a choice," he said like he was weighing it. "I grew up with a golden retriever that ate a couch," we laughed. The pancakes were thick and soft. We ate them with berries and a little maple syrup. After he washed the dishes because he wanted to, and I let him because accepting help is a kind of intimacy we forget to practice. He hurt his shoulder a week later. Nothing dramatic. He told me he reached high at a job site to move a light tool, and it was like a rubber band had snapped somewhere between bone and memory. He showed up at the gym with his smile in place and his left arm held a little too close to his side. "Are you okay?" I asked, and the doctor in me started running down a list of questions and scenarios. "Mostly," he said. I iced it. "It hurts when I reach back. We can modify," I said softly. "Do you want me to take a look? I mean, not as your doctor, because I'm not. Just as your friend who knows shoulders." He nodded, eyes steady. We found a quiet corner near the stretching mats. I asked him to lift and rotate, to find that place where discomfort becomes information. He did, trusting me to watch how his body moved, trusting me to come close without making it weird. Medicine teaches you how to touch with care. Friendships teach you the rest. "It looks like a mild strain," I said. "Rotator cuff." You probably aggravated an old thing. I showed him a couple of gentle movements, small exercises with a green resistance band. He followed my lead, face serious and soft both at once. He grimaced a little when it tugged just right. Let's give it a couple weeks, I said. We'll go slow. We? He asked, and his voice was more grateful than surprised. We, I repeated. If you like, we modified our mornings. Bands, light dumbbells, slow work that people think doesn't count because it doesn't sweat enough. He listened to my suggestions like he would to a coach who cared. I listened to his patience as if it were a language I needed to learn. We walked home instead of running, which meant conversation drifted into places the treadmill does not invite. We talked about music. He liked Springsteen and Brandy Carlisle. I liked jazz on Sunday afternoons when I could pretend I owned a houseplant I didn't kill. He told me about a woman he'd dated for 2 years and how they parted kindly, not because something catastrophic happened, but because the map was leading them to different towns. He did not in those weeks ask me about men. I did not bring it up. Some days you let silence be the kindest sound. At the clinic, I told my patients about rest and healing. I told them we are not broken for needing time. I believed it because I watched Jake hold himself still enough to let a muscle remember what it is for. If you are listening and you are older, maybe in your 70s or 80s, you know something we forget in our hurry. Healing is slow not because it is stubborn, but because it wants to last. Late one Tuesday, he texted me, "Do you want to see the farmer's market Saturday? I have a craving for tomatoes I can't justify in February. There is a winter market in a church basement, the kind that smells like coffee and cinnamon and hope." We went, coats open, scarves slightly ridiculous. We bought bread like we were going to feed a small congregation. He picked up a bouquet of tulips for his sister Hannah, who had just had a baby. He held the flowers like he wasn't sure he deserved to carry something so bright. We stopped at a booth selling honey. The woman there wore a wide purple headband and had hands like someone who knows bees the way you know family. "Try this," she said, handing us wooden sticks with a drop of gold at the tip. I tasted mine and closed my eyes. "This is summer," I said, "in a spoon." Jake smiled at me in that way that makes you notice the moment is co-signing your joy. "2 jars," he told the woman. "1 for me, 1 for the doctor unless that breaks a rule." "Only rule is we tell the truth about how good it is," I said. We walked to my apartment again because rituals are just kindnesses practiced more than once. The snow had been a rumor that day. The light was the kind that makes you think Chicago might forgive you for living here. He took off his jacket and stood in my little kitchen, and I felt the calm I get when a first-time patient comes in worried and leaves with a plan. "Can I ask you something?" he said, leaning against the counter. "You can ask me anything," I answered, choosing the words with care. I have said that in exam rooms, but it sounds different when you say it to a person who looks at you like the world might be safer near you. "I have been thinking about this for a while," he said. He looked at his hands as if they were translating for him. "I always thought I understood myself in a certain way. Men are friends. Women are dating." It was simple. "But lately, doing these mornings with you, talking, there's a thing inside that is awake. And it's quiet and kind of scared, but it's clear." Is that a crazy sentence? I took a breath because breathing gives your brain a seat to sit in while your heart catches up. "No," I said. "It is not crazy. It is honest." "Which is harder?" He nodded, shoulders relaxing a fraction. "I don't know what it means. I'm not asking you to define me. I wanted you to know, in case you were wondering. Or not. But I was wondering." I felt a warm pressure in my chest, like the way you feel an elevator move even when you can't see the floor numbers change. I set down the jar of honey. "Thank you," I said, "for trusting me with that. I was wondering. And I was trying not to break what we have by making you responsible for something you hadn't said yet." He swallowed. "Do you have feelings for me?" "Yes," I said, because medicine has taught me that clear answers are mercies. "I do." "I have for a while." He nodded, and then he laughed softly, relief making him younger by a year. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We can go slow," I said. "We can make it simple and kind. We can decide what you want to call it later or never, but we can be honest now." He looked at me, And then he stepped closer in that way people do when they have been moving toward each other 1 millimeter at a time for months. "Can I?" he started, and I met him halfway, because consent is not an obstacle. It is an invitation. Our first kiss was not fireworks. It was a room coming into focus after you thought you knew it well. He was careful, as if he were holding something irreplaceable. We were two adults with histories and hope, and nothing hurt except a little in my chest because opening is a stretch you feel. We stood there, forehead to forehead, while the city hummed in that winter way, streetlights making halos on the snowpack. "I don't know what this makes me," he said softly. "I don't know my label." "You don't need one right now," I said. "You need a truth. The rest you can name when it helps you." He nodded. "Can we not tell anyone yet? I mean, not because I'm ashamed. I just want to understand it before I ask other people to understand it with me." "Absolutely," I said. "No timetables. Only what is kind for both of us." We cooked dinner and ate on the couch, knees touching like we were sharing a bench seat at a baseball game. When he left, he kissed me again, a little braver. And when the door closed, I stood in my small apartment with my hands on my heart, the way you do when your body needs help believing good news. The next weeks were a study in careful joy. At the gym, we were the same as always, because the gym is a place where privacy is respected as long as you put the weights back where they belong. At home, or walking by the lake, or at a quiet booth in a diner that still makes eggs like it's 1975, we learned how to hold hands without making the world smaller. He liked the way I drink coffee like it's a storm I'm trying to calm. I liked the way he notices small things, the way a bus driver waves to a crossing guard, the color of the sky before it decides to snow again. I told my best friend Maya, because she is the person who hears everything first and holds it without squeezing. She works in public health and has a laugh that could fix a broken window. We sat in a booth at Manny's eating matzo ball soup because it was a day that needed it, and I told her about the mornings. The honey, the kiss. "Are you happy?" she asked in a doctor voice because she knows that's the question that matters. "Yes," I said. "And careful?" "Good," she said, and then smiled. "Let me know when careful needs support. I have a folding chair and a righteous speech ready." Jake told his sister Hannah first. He sent me a picture afterward. 2 brothers-in-law, uncles, and their baby asleep on his shoulder, tulips in a jar behind them. He said she cried, then laughed, then said, "I love you," then asked what we wanted for dinner to celebrate. Later he said, "She said I've always been a soft place for people to land. She said I deserve one too." I did not know how much I needed to hear that. If you're older and listening, maybe you remember a time when a story like mine was not told in public, when the good news had to stay in a drawer. Things are better now, and sometimes they are still hard. Both can be true. That is why we went slow. We had our first conflict 2 months in, which is not an admission of failure. It is proof that we were not pretending. He canceled a dinner twice in a row with a text message that sounded like someone trying to carry too much alone. "I'm sorry. Work is wild. Rain delayed the pour. I'll call tomorrow." Tomorrow came and was shy. I waited a day to breathe and let the anxious parts of me make their list without letting them mail it. Then I sent him a message, the kind I might send a patient whose blood pressure numbers worried me but who missed their follow-up. "Hey, I'm here. You do not owe me perfect. I care more when things are messy. Call when it's kind to you." He called an hour later, voice small. "I'm sorry," he said. "They put me in charge of fixing something I didn't break, and I went into a tunnel. I do that. I didn't want you to think I was pulling away because of us." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I missed you." "That is not an accusation. It's information." He laughed, and you could hear him sit down on the floor of his apartment like a kid. "Information received," he said. "I miss you too. We met for a walk. It was raining, that Chicago rain that doesn't care about your umbrella's opinion. We wore ridiculous yellow slickers and felt like people in an old movie. He talked about work. I listened and asked questions the way I do when the story needs more air. He took my hand halfway across a crosswalk on Milwaukee Avenue, and a man in a van yelled something nobody needs to hear. Jake squeezed my hand, then squeezed it again. "People like that believe the world is small," he said. "Let's not make ours smaller to match." We saw a counselor together once at his request. He said, I need help building a language for this, so I don't make you responsible for teaching me all the words. I could have hugged the world for making him. The counselor gave us a handful of phrases that worked for us. Thanks for sharing. What do you need from me right now? Do you want advice or company? Those seem small until you realize they are keys. We told his father at Thanksgiving. It was his idea, not mine. He said he wanted to say the thing in the place where the walls had learned him as a child. He wanted to unspool the old story at the same table where he had been told to finish his carrots. We drove to Indiana, where the sky is bigger and time goes differently, and we brought pies from a bakery near my apartment to show our respect for tradition we did not have ovens for. His father, Bill, was a quiet man with hands that had admired engines. He did not smile easily, but when he did, it looked like a new season. We ate turkey and stuffing, and the baby, Hannah's girl, laughed at peas like they were a convincing comedian. After dessert, Jake cleared his throat in that way men are taught instead of how to cry. He said, "Dad, there's something I've been learning about myself. I'm seeing someone." He looked at me. It was both a question and a statement. "It's Evan. The room has its own acoustics in moments like that. You can hear forks and people and the past and future all auditioning for the same role." Bill set down his coffee like it might break, then looked at his son for a long time. In a voice that had never learned how to whisper, he said, "Are you safe?" I wanted to lean in. Instead, I watched a father who loved his son but spoke a language that had been edited by his era. "Yes," Jake said. "I am safe. I'm happy. I care about him." Bill nodded once, twice, like he was tuning a radio to the right station. "Okay," he said. "I love you. That doesn't change." He looked at me then, and I felt the old utilities of a man's gaze. He said, "Tell me about your work, Evan." I did. I told him about my clinic. I told him about the woman who finally got her blood pressure under control after we found out her cuff at home was faulty, and how sometimes problems are solutions in disguise. He listened. Later, while we washed dishes, he said to me, "My generation, we didn't have a lot of room for this. Doesn't mean the room wasn't needed. If I say something wrong, tell me. I'm still learning how to be a dad in a new world." "Thank you," I said. "I can do that." When we drove back to Chicago, the sky did that thing it does where it looks like a late painting. Pink, gold, gray, optimism, and resignation in layers. Jake kept one hand on the wheel and one hand on my leg in a way that said, "I am separate and also here." "That went better than I feared," he said, which is the correct measurement for most family meetings. December to February is long in Chicago, but this year the days had more gentle corners. We cooked together, which is more about timing than recipes. He made a pasta sauce that could fix a small country. I made roasted vegetables that finally convinced him cauliflower was not a punishment. We watched hockey and argued pleasantly about rules neither of us fully remembered. We bought a little evergreen and decorated it with lights and paper stars that made the room look like a child's drawing of joy. At the gym, he healed. His shoulder remembered itself. The green band retired to my drawer next to takeout menus and a screwdriver I never use. We started lifting heavier again, spotting each other the way we used to, but now with the knowledge that you can trust someone in more than one way. One morning, he looked up from the bench and said, "I want to try for my old PR. Let's set you up," I said. "And if your body says no, that is not failure. That is communication." He smiled and said, "I like your doctor voice." I laughed. "My patients like it too when it tells them to rest." He lifted and nailed it. I could feel his pride radiate like heat. We celebrated with omelets and toast at a diner where the waitress called everyone honey and meant it. If you're listening and you are my age or older, you know that happiness in your 30s and 40s is different. It is more deliberate. You choose it in the mornings like a jacket. In March, after the snow reconsidered its options, we adopted a dog. He had visited a shelter for a volunteer day with his company, and he called me that afternoon. "There's a dog here who looks like a question mark, and a cinnamon roll had a baby. I think his name is Scout," I laughed. "You think his name is Scout?" "I do now that I've met him. We went on Saturday, and there he was. A brown and white mutt with one ear up and one ear skeptically down, the shepherd in him negotiating with the beagle. He leaned into our knees like we were the island he'd been planning to land on. We filled out forms and bought a leash that matched nothing we owned. At home, Scout did a tour of the apartment and then fell asleep with his entire face in my shoe like it was a pillow he'd saved up for. Scout got us out of the house on days we might have stayed in. We met neighbors we had never met, the way people with dogs do as if they've joined a friendly union. An older man on our block, Mr. C, told us stories about Navy Pier in the 1960s, while Scout tried hard to lick his hand with appropriate respect. Joy begets conversation, and conversation makes neighborhoods safer and kinder. There were hard moments. Of course there were. A co-worker of Jake's made a joke that was not a joke about men like me. It was the kind of casual cruelty that wears a button-up shirt and goes home to a mortgage. Jake told me that night, quiet with anger. I didn't laugh, he said. I told him I was seeing someone and I didn't appreciate it. He said he didn't mean anything by it. I said, you did, and now I have. I think I might not get invited to happy hour for a while. I'm proud of you, I said. And I'm sorry you had to spend energy on educating a grown man who should know better. He nodded. I'm not trying to be an activist. I'm trying to be myself. But I guess sometimes being one turns you into the other. Sometimes, I agreed. The work you do is quiet most days. It is still work, but please know that none of it is required for you to be loved. He kissed my forehead with a tenderness that made the room feel like a chapel. You make me braver, he said. We went to the Art Institute on a free day and stood in front of paintings like we were meeting people we'd heard legends about. He liked the Chagalls, the way the blue held everything gently. I liked the American wing, the pottery that made you think about meals eaten by people who were trying as hard as we are now. We walked through the city and found a little coffee shop I hadn't seen before, the kind where the barista knows your name by the second visit because they are very good at their job. The owner, a woman with perfect silver hair, asked about Scout and gave him a dog biscuit, which he took with a solemnity I envied. In May, we planned a small trip to Door County, a practice run at being away together where the trees make green out of everything. We rented a brown cabin with a porch that faced a lake. We played cards. We burned pancakes on purpose once and ate them anyway because char has its place in a love story too. We walked until our feet argued and our hearts settled. One night, in that gold hour that feels like mercy, he said, I think I know my word. I think I'm bisexual. He said it with care, like he was laying down a piece of equipment that had weight. Thank you for sharing that with me, I said, and meant his exact phrasing back to him. What does having the word give you? A place to stand, he said. A way to tell people without telling them the whole book. Do you want me to use that word when I talk about you? I asked. Yes, he said, when it's needed. Some days I just want to be Jake. Most days, really. You'll mostly be Jake, I promised. The rest is decoration. We told a few more people after that. His friend Dave, who surprised us both by hugging him so hard I thought my spine might submit paperwork. My colleague, Dr. Chen, who looked at me like I'd just told her a good lab result. She said, love is good for your blood pressure, which is not a medically approved claim, but is true. I am telling you all this because I want you to know that love in your 30s is not a movie that plays itself. It is medicine taken faithfully, meals cooked with attention, apologies followed by behavior with better posture. It is listening. It is choosing to talk about how you put the towels away because someday that will matter too. It is noticing when the other person is quiet and asking, do you want to tell me what the quiet is saying? It is laughing when the dog steals your sock and runs down the hallway like he won the lottery. A year after that first morning back in the gym, we went back to that bench press with the old numbers written in our heads. The gym smelled like rubber and effort. We warmed up. We stretched. We talked about nothing. Taxes, Scout's new trick, whether we should go to a ball game. He lay down on the bench. I stood behind him with my hands relaxed, ready. He lifted a weight that meant something to his younger self, and when he racked it successfully, he looked up at me with eyes that knew the exact shape of what we had built. Do you know what I think about when I lift now? He asked when we were standing next to the water fountain that makes everything taste like a slow yes. What? I think about how you spot me even when I'm not under the bar. I smiled. took his face in my hands because nobody at the gym was paying attention except the dumbbells who do not report back. "We spot each other," I said. We walked home past the bakery where you can smell the bread before you see the line. The city was green like a promise kept. We talked about next year, maybe a bigger apartment with a patch of sunlight that belonged to nobody but Scout from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Maybe a porch with potted herbs we would forget to water and then remember. We let the future unfold like a map on a picnic table, corners held down with cups. We did not rush to move in. We went slow. We met in the middle the way people do when they trust time. When he did bring over more of his things, it was a small migration. A box of baseball caps, a framed photo of his mom and him at a high school game, a chipped mug that said "Best Uncle" in a font that needed to calm down. My apartment learned him, and I made room like people did for me when I was new. If you have ever wondered whether love is still possible, after a marriage, after a loss, after decades of telling yourself you are fine alone, I want to say what I tell patients who apologize for not coming in sooner. You are here now. That is enough. The body learns new patterns at any age. The heart, too. On our second summer, we went to a pride parade with his sister and the baby, who was not really a baby anymore but insisted on waving at all the dancers like she was running for mayor of Joy. Jake held my hand and squeezed it in a rhythm only we know, and I thought about all the people who made a day like that possible by speaking, marching, risking, voting, loving out loud when it was not safe. I said a quiet thank you to strangers. That night, we walked Scout, and an older neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, waved from her stoop. "Boys," she said, "I am 91. You look happy. That is the only thing that matters at my age." "We are," I said. "Thank you," she nodded. "Good, the world gives you heavy bags. You are allowed to put them down." In the fall, we went to a game at Wrigley. He wore his lucky cap. I wore a patience for hot dogs I didn't plan to eat. In the 7th inning, with the organ doing its hallowed best, he leaned into me and said, "Do you want to build a home with me?" I turned and looked at him like the first time I saw him again near the rowing machines, the way light wants to make promises. "I would like that," I said. "I would like that very much." We did what households do. We budgeted. We compared neighborhoods like people compare apples that are both clearly apples. We walked through apartments where the floors slanted like opinions and the windows made promises they couldn't keep. And then we found one, a warm second-floor place in a brick 2-flat, with creaky floors that sang the house's age and a small porch that faced a tree that would be green and then gold and then honest about its bones. We signed the lease and brought Scout over before we brought any furniture. He trotted around, approved the corners, and then flopped in the rectangle of light near the back door like he had always lived there. Moving day was the kind of chaos that makes you learn your patience muscle. Boxes were labeled with a system that made sense to me and made Jake laugh. Maya brought lunch and labeled the kitchen drawers in her perfect handwriting, utensils, knives, measuring cups. His sister arrived with the baby, who is now a little girl with opinions about where the cereal should live. At the end of the day, when the last helper left and the door latched behind them, we stood in our kitchen with our hands on our lower backs like old men who had earned their aches. The sun made a square of light on the floor. I hugged him from behind and put my chin on his shoulder. He reached back and found my fingers. We stood like that for a while. We still went to the gym. We still did the thing that started the story. The mornings were ours, and the world felt less noisy before other people's plans found their voices. We added a new ritual. After lifting, we would sit in the steam room for 5 minutes, letting the heat make us elastic. We would not talk. We would just be, and often, that's when I would feel it most. The surprise that this life had found me after I stopped auditioning for it. The quiet work of care, the old gym, and the new home. The man I thought was straight who surprised me and himself both by telling the truth. If you're waiting for the part where we get engaged in a dramatic gesture, I'm going to disappoint you. The proposal had no flash mob, no skywriting, no confetti cannons. It happened on a Tuesday night, between a lasagna and a thunderstorm, while Scout hid under the table because weather, in his opinion, is a personal insult. We had put the plates in the sink to soak. Jake dried his hands on a dish towel and then turned toward me with a face that was my home and my horizon. I know we already decided to build a life, he said. But I want to ask you anyway because asking is important. Evan, will you marry me? I laughed, and it sounded like a cry because our bodies do not hold joy neatly. I nodded and said yes in a voice I trust now more than any other. We hugged in the way that puts your hearts next to each other's sternums as if testing for a match. We didn't put a ring on it right away. We called his sister. We called Maya. We told Scout, who wagged in the way that says, I do not know what you are saying, but I know that you are happy. We picked rings a week later at a small jeweler who didn't try to upsell us on diamonds we didn't need. We chose simple bands that felt like metal had learned humility. We made plans for a ceremony in a backyard because we wanted something the size of our gratitude, which is vast but not loud. We wrote vows that promised the small and the large things, to do the stupid errands, to remember joy on purpose, to ask what the quiet is saying, to spot each other between sets, and on days when the weights are invisible. On the morning we got married, the sky was undecided and then merciful. The tree near our porch shook its leaves like applause. Hannah read a poem that reminded me of rainy days and sunshine both because she is not sentimental, but she is a joy librarian. Maya cried and then made us laugh because she cannot do one without the other for long. Bill wore a tie he had bought in a department store that didn't hire people like us when he was young, and he hugged me in a way that meant we were family before the legal language knew it. We said our vows, and when I looked at Jake, I saw the whole story at once. The gray gym, the green band, the honey, the church basement market, the thunderstorm, the shelf in the shower where he keeps his shampoo next to mine, equal citizens in a small republic. I saw the man who had surprised himself by saying a brave sentence in a small kitchen, and the man who had learned that love doesn't erase your past. It gives you a way to carry it without it cutting into your palms. After, we ate sandwiches on paper plates because even on the big days, you still have to eat. We danced on the porch to a Springsteen song that made our parents' generation understand something about the logistics of our joy. Scout wore a bow tie he despised in a color that did his fur no favors. Neighbors waved from their stoops. A kid in a Spider-Man costume said, "Cool wedding," like he was giving a Yelp review. We went to the lake at sunset and watched the water decide to be gold. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. Some days, the best love is the kind where your silence speaks in the same direction. He took my hand. I squeezed back. This is the part where the credits might roll if this were a movie. But it isn't. It's a life. Which means tomorrow we will wake up, walk the dog, and go to the gym. We will choose breakfast and say good luck to a world that needs it. We will listen to our patients and our co-workers and the man at the counter at the coffee shop who doesn't know he tells the best jokes. We will do laundry and fold it the way he does because he is better at it. We will make dinner and one of us will forget cilantro. We will laugh and turn on the radio and kiss in the kitchen because it's not special to kiss in the kitchen, and that is what makes life special. If you are listening and wondering how to begin, maybe you go for a walk. Maybe you lift something heavier than yesterday. Maybe you tell someone the quiet thing you've been carrying, the sentence that scares you because it's true. Maybe you let yourself be surprised by a friend you thought you understood. Maybe you remember that the heart is a muscle, and muscles grow with use and care and rest. When I think back to that first morning with Jake, the sounds come back first. The hum of the treadmills, the clank of plates, the trainer's voice counting for someone who needed to hear their strength. The city saying good morning in a language of bus breaks and coffee lids. And under all of it, a quieter music, the kind I almost missed because I was busy surviving the day. I am grateful I heard it. I am grateful he heard it too. It started as a workout. It became a way of learning how to carry our lives with grace. It became coffee and honey and a dog who thinks thunder is rude. It became choosing each other on regular days. It became a surprise that feels like something I knew in my bones before my brain caught up. We still go slow in some ways because slow is sustainable and tender and how you build. But we are fast when it matters. Fast to apologize, fast to laugh, fast to say I'm here. If you see us at the gym, two men about your age or older, talking about shoulder health like it's the latest blockbuster, know that we are practicing the easiest hard thing we ever did. Telling the truth, spotting each other, and letting love be a daily habit. The other day, a young man in the free weight area asked us if we were training for something. Jake looked at me, and I could see the 16 answers he could have given. Physically stronger, marathon life. He said, "We're training for tomorrow." The young man nodded like he understood more than he knew how to say. He went back to his deadlifts. We went back to ours. After, as we walked home under a sky that had decided on blue, I said, "Do you think we would have found this if we hadn't started going to the gym again?" He squeezed my hand. "Probably," he said, "because if it hadn't been there, it would have been somewhere else." "You were walking toward me before we even knew it." I smiled and looked at the city I had chosen, and the man who had chosen me back, and thought about the advice I give my patients when the diagnosis is not the one they wanted. We will take the next right step. That is what we do. And step by step, breath by breath, set by set, a life shows up that fits. So we went home, made dinner with too much garlic, and later, while the dishwasher made its small weather, we went to bed. The night made its sound against the windows. Scout snored like he had nothing left to fix. I put my hand on Jake's chest and felt the steady beat, the sweetest rhythm I know. And I thought, as sleep took us both where it takes the honest and the tired, that the workout had just taught us the oldest lesson there is: repetition makes strength, care makes meaning, and love. Love surprises you when you've been practicing being ready for it all along.